Imagine the world in 2008. Banks were collapsing. Trust was evaporating. The global economy was trembling like a tower of cards. People saw their life savings vanish, not because they were careless or irresponsible, but because the system itself was fragile, opaque, and built on layers of trust that could be broken at any moment. It was a time when the world learned a painful truth. Even institutions that seemed untouchable could fall. And when they did, ordinary citizens were the first to suffer. Governments rushed to print more money, bail out the very institutions that had caused the crisis, and push the consequences onto the people. Confidence in the financial system was shaken at its core. At the same time, technology was blossoming. The internet connected minds across continents. Digital life was expanding rapidly. Yet money, the most fundamental tool of economic interaction, remained controlled by centralized authorities. Every transaction required an intermediary, a bank, a payment company, or some entity we had no choice but to trust. If someone sent money, that payment could be reversed. Accounts could be frozen. Transfers across borders were slow, expensive, and subject to approval by systems we didn't control. Digital payments existed, yes, but they were simply digital representations of old structures, not something truly native to the internet era. And then, quietly, on October 31st, 2008, a message appeared on a cryptography mailing list. Just an email, no grand announcement, no organization behind it. The author was someone named Satoshi Nakamoto, a person or group that remains unknown to this day. Attached to that email was a paper only 9 pages long, titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Simple, almost academic. Yet that document would soon reshape how the world thinks about money. Satoshi began the paper with a clear vision, a financial system where two people could send value to each other directly without needing to rely on banks or payment processors. A system built not on trust in institutions, but on mathematics, cryptography, and open verification. In a world where trust had been shattered, Satoshi proposed a form of money that didn't require trust at all. The idea sounded radical. How could digital money exist without a central authority? In traditional finance, we rely on banks to confirm balances and prevent someone from spending the same funds twice. Without a central ledger, how could a network of strangers reach agreement on who owns what? This was the problem that had haunted digital currency attempts for decades. Many had tried before. All had failed. But Satoshi introduced a solution that was elegant and revolutionary: a public, distributed ledger maintained collectively by those who use the system. Instead of a bank verifying transactions, the entire network would verify them. Instead of accounts controlled by institutions, users would hold their own keys, their own assets, without permission required. Instead of trust, there would be transparency. Instead of fragility, resilience. Bitcoin was not just new technology, it was a new philosophy, a challenge to the status quo, a belief that money could be free from control, censorship, manipulation, and borders. The white paper outlined how this could be achieved step by step, turning what once seemed impossible into something surprisingly simple when explained clearly. You could almost imagine the few researchers reading that email in 2008, scrolling through lines of dense cryptographic language, unaware that they were witnessing the seed of a global financial revolution. No one knew that 9 pages would spark a movement, inspire thousands of developers, create millionaires, challenge governments, and redefine digital ownership. But it all starts with understanding what Bitcoin really is, beyond headlines and hype. The white paper proposed a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, meaning users transact directly with one another. No bank authorizing payments, no company taking fees in the middle, just two humans, maybe strangers, sending value through the internet with no friction. This concept alone cracked open a door society never thought could be opened. For the first time, value could move like information moves, freely. But to truly understand Bitcoin, we must move beyond the story and into the mechanism. How does such a system operate without trust? How can strangers agree on the validity of transactions? How does the network keep itself secure from fraud, manipulation, or double spending? These are the questions Satoshi answered plainly in the white paper, questions that form the foundation of Bitcoin as we know it. Before Bitcoin, digital money was a fragile concept. If you sent a file over the internet, you could copy it infinitely. If money were just a file, nothing would stop someone from duplicating it and spending it twice. That is the double spending problem, one of the greatest barriers in creating digital currency. Satoshi didn't just solve it, he solved it in a way that removed the need for a central authority entirely. We are standing at the doorway now, the threshold of understanding. The world was broken, trust was broken, and out of that crisis came a document that offered not just a tool, but hope, a new model of value, a new architecture for money. Something born not from power or politics, but from code, open, verifiable, and resistant to manipulation. And so, with the world still recovering from financial collapse, the Bitcoin white paper emerged quietly, almost humbly, like a spark in the night. No one knew yet that the spark would become a wildfire. But to appreciate the fire, we must examine the flame. What exactly did Satoshi build? And why does it matter so deeply? In the next part, we will dive into the essence of Bitcoin itself, how a peer-to-peer cash system functions, how transactions flow through the network, and why the absence of intermediaries is not a weakness, but its greatest strength. To understand Bitcoin, we have to forget, even for a moment, everything we think we know about money. We are used to banks keeping score, to accounts holding numbers on a screen that represent value, to institutions telling us what we can or cannot do with our own funds. When we send money digitally through a bank or a payment app, we don't really move money. We request someone else to update a ledger on our behalf. We are borrowing trust. We are assuming the system will honor our transaction, maintain our balance, and protect our funds. We are dependent on them to preserve the truth. Bitcoin breaks that dependency completely. In the Bitcoin system, there is no bank updating the ledger. Instead, the ledger is shared openly across thousands, now millions of computers around the world. Anyone can run a node, anyone can observe the history of transactions, anyone can verify the truth for themselves. It is public, transparent, and unstoppable as long as one computer anywhere still carries the chain. This is what Satoshi meant by peer-to-peer electronic cash. Money that moves directly from one user to another, validated by the network itself, without needing permission from any authority. Imagine standing in a marketplace. You take a coin out of your pocket and give it to someone in exchange for bread. The coin leaves your hand and enters theirs. No one else has to approve it. No one can reverse it. It is final. Bitcoin recreates that same simplicity, but on the internet. When Alice sends Bitcoin to Bob, she isn't asking a company to move funds on her behalf. She is broadcasting a digital transaction signed with her private key, and the network, through consensus, confirms that she had the Bitcoin to spend and that she transferred it to Bob. The transaction is final, irreversible, and recorded permanently. This concept of self-custody is radical. It means you can hold your own assets without depending on a bank. Your Bitcoin is controlled by cryptographic keys, and only you can sign transactions with them. Lose your keys, and the Bitcoin is gone forever. No help desk can recover it. But keep your keys secure, and no government, bank, or corporation can stop you from transacting. Money becomes something you truly own. At the heart of this system is a network of nodes, computers that store the blockchain, validate transactions, and maintain consensus. Each node independently verifies new transactions according to the rules laid out in the protocol. These rules are the constitution of Bitcoin. No more than 21 million BTC will ever exist. Every Bitcoin must trace back to a legitimate origin, and transactions must follow cryptographic proof. There is no negotiation, no bending the rules for convenience. The code does not care about status or authority. It treats every user equally. Satoshi's white paper explains how these transactions flow like information. When someone creates a transaction, it is broadcast across the network, spreading from node to node. At first, it sits unconfirmed in what is known as the mempool, a waiting room of sorts, until miners pick it up to include in the next block. But before it can be added to a block, the transaction must be valid. Nodes check whether Alice actually owns the Bitcoin she wants to send, meaning she must reference a previous transaction that paid her those funds. This chain of ownership stretches back through time, all the way to the moment the Bitcoin was first created. The network mathematically verifies this history without trusting any individual participant. There is beauty in this structure. It turns a chaotic network of strangers into a harmonious orchestra of verification. Everyone checks everyone else's work. If someone tries to cheat, say, by spending the same Bitcoin twice, the network rejects it. No authority needs to step in. The rules themselves enforce honesty. This peer-to-peer design also removes borders. Whether Alice is in New York and Bob is in Lagos, or one is under restrictive capital controls while the other is not, the transaction feels the same. It doesn't ask for identification. It doesn't wait for banking hours. It doesn't care about nationality or politics. Bitcoin simply moves. It flows like water, ignoring walls that traditional finance built over centuries. A message containing value, traveling freely from one human to another. For many, this idea is liberating. For others, it is threatening. A system where no one can freeze accounts, censor payments, or inflate supply challenges those who benefit from controlling money. But for ordinary individuals, the unbanked, the oppressed, the curious, the forward-thinking, Bitcoin offers a lifeline, a way to store value beyond the reach of institutions, a way to send money across oceans in minutes, a way to participate in a global economic network without needing permission from anyone. And yet, as revolutionary as this architecture is, it only works because Bitcoin solved a problem that haunted digital currency for decades. Without trust, how do we ensure no one cheats? How do we know someone isn't duplicating funds like copying a file? How do we prevent the double spending problem, the greatest obstacle that made previous attempts at digital money fail? This is where the white paper becomes brilliant, not just ideologically, but technically. Satoshi's solution was to create a chain of time-stamped records, a blockchain, that proves which transactions came first, mathematically eliminating the possibility of spending the same coins twice. Every block references the one before it, forming a chain that stretches back to the very beginning, the Genesis block. To change one block, you would have to change every block after it, and convince the majority of the network to accept your altered version. In practice, this is nearly impossible. But how does this chain maintain itself? Who writes new blocks? Who secures the network against attackers? To understand that, we must go deeper into the mechanism that powers Bitcoin, mining, and the proof-of-work consensus model. It is here that mathematics, game theory, and economic incentives work together as an engine, driving the system forward and keeping it safe. In the next part, we will step into the core of Bitcoin's innovation, the blockchain itself. We will explore how it prevents double spending, why it is immutable, and how this elegant structure laid the foundation for decentralized money to exist for the first time in history. To truly appreciate why Bitcoin is revolutionary, we must step inside the mechanism that makes it work, the blockchain. This word has become famous, even fashionable, yet many people still misunderstand what it really is. In the simplest sense, a blockchain is nothing more than a ledger, a record of transactions. But instead of existing inside a bank's database, it exists everywhere. It is distributed, replicated across thousands of machines around the world. Each participant holds the same truth, the same history, and because of that shared record, no one can secretly change it. Before Bitcoin, digital money was just numbers in a database controlled by a central authority. If someone tried to spend the same digital token twice, the central server would stop it. But without a central server, how could such fraud be prevented? That was the puzzle that stalled all previous attempts at digital currency. If money is just data, what stops someone from duplicating it like a file, sending one copy here and another there? The double spending problem was the final barrier. Satoshi didn't just bypass it, he confronted it directly with the invention of the blockchain. The white paper explains that each Bitcoin transaction references a previous one, forming a chain of ownership. But these transactions alone are not enough. They need to be grouped, organized, time-stamped, and sealed in such a way that the entire network agrees on a single, consistent history. This is where blocks enter the story. Think of a block like a digital page in a book. It contains a list of recent transactions, who sent what to whom, and once filled, it is sealed with a cryptographic signature called a hash. A hash is a mathematical fingerprint. Change even one tiny detail inside the block, a number, a letter, a comma, and the hash becomes completely different. This unique fingerprint ensures integrity. It proves that a block has not been tampered with. But Satoshi added one more brilliant twist. Each block contains not only its own hash, but also the hash of the previous block. This links them together into a chain, each block reinforcing the last. To modify a single block, you would have to regenerate every block that comes after it, an almost impossible task without enormous computing power and network control. This simple structure creates something astonishing: immutability. It becomes practically unchangeable once enough blocks have been added on top. History becomes permanent. Truth becomes verifiable. There is no administrator who can rewrite account balances, no authority who can erase a transaction. The ledger becomes a public artifact, a transparent monument of every exchange that ever happened. Anyone can inspect it. Anyone can verify it. The blockchain replaces trust with proof. But the system still needs a way to choose which block is the next one, especially when the network is global and no single machine is in charge. If two people try to create different blocks at the same time, how does the network decide which one becomes part of the official chain? How does it prevent chaos, forks, or disagreements? This is where economic incentives and proof of work enter as guardians of consensus. Instead of voting based on identity, which could be faked, Bitcoin votes based on computational work. In other words, the correct chain is the one with the most accumulated energy behind it. Miners expend electricity to solve complex puzzles, racing to produce a valid block. Solving the puzzle proves they invested real resources, and the network rewards them with newly minted Bitcoin. It is a game built on incentives. Honest participation is profitable, while dishonesty is expensive. The white paper describes this elegantly. As long as honest miners control the majority of computational power, the network remains secure. An attacker would need to gather more power than all honest participants combined to rewrite history. It becomes economically irrational, far more costly to attack than to participate fairly. This was Satoshi's genius, turning security into a competition, one that naturally aligns self-interest with the survival of the system. The blockchain grows one block at a time, each anchored in the one before. This rhythm is the heartbeat of Bitcoin. Every approximately 10 minutes, another block is added, another piece of truth is cemented into history. Over time, the chain becomes a towering record stretching back to 2009, when the first block, the Genesis block, was mined. Embedded in it was a message, perhaps a quiet protest or a warning. The Times 03 Jan 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. It was not just data. It was a statement, a timestamp of disillusionment with the financial system, a spark of rebellion encoded into the foundation of a digital revolution. As more blocks accumulate, the security of old transactions grows. If someone tries to rewrite history, they must redo all the work of every block after the one they want to change, while simultaneously catching up to the ongoing chain being extended by honest miners. The deeper the transaction lies beneath new layers, the safer it becomes. Finality is earned through time and computation. This design has consequences. It means Bitcoin is slow compared to centralized payment networks, by intention. It prioritizes security and decentralization over speed. Yet this trade-off is what makes it dependable. It is solid not because it is fast, but because it is unbreakable. For quicker, everyday payments, second-layer solutions like the Lightning Network now exist, advancements that the original white paper only hinted at indirectly. The foundation was laid, and others have continued building on it. The blockchain is more than a ledger. It is a story, a living narrative of trustless cooperation, of strangers agreeing on truth without knowing each other, without needing to. It is the first time in human history that ownership can be verified globally without authority or permission. It transforms money from something we are granted access to into something we possess outright. And all of this emerges from a 9-page document released to a small mailing list, a document that would gradually ignite a paradigm shift in how people think about value, ownership, and freedom. But innovation does not end with blockchain. To keep the ledger secure and growing, Bitcoin relies on miners who provide the computational work that anchors each block. They are the unsung workers of this new digital economy, maintaining the network through competition, cryptography, and incentive. Now that we understand how Bitcoin prevents double spending and builds an immutable ledger, we can explore the engine that powers it: mining and proof of work. This is where mathematics meets economics, where code becomes culture, and where digital scarcity is born. In the next part, we will enter the mines to understand how blocks are created, why energy matters, and how this process keeps Bitcoin decentralized, secure, and alive. If the blockchain is the history book of Bitcoin, then mining is the printing press that continues writing it. It is the engine that powers the network, the mechanism that produces new blocks, secures the ledger, and releases Bitcoin into circulation. Without mining, Bitcoin would be like a ship without wind, a machine without electricity. Satoshi's brilliance was not only in inventing the blockchain, but in designing an incentive structure that keeps it alive through voluntary participation. Mining begins with competition. Thousands of miners around the world run specialized machines that constantly attempt to solve a complex cryptographic puzzle. The puzzle itself is simple to verify, but extremely hard to solve, like trying to guess a number with trillions of possibilities. Miners repeatedly generate hashes, hoping to find one that meets the network's current difficulty target. Most guesses fail. The machines try again. Billions of attempts per second, an endless race of computation. Why would anyone do this? Because the first miner to solve the puzzle earns the right to add the next block to the blockchain and is rewarded with Bitcoin. This reward has two components: newly created coins, the block subsidy, and transaction fees from the transactions included in the block. In this way, mining serves two purposes at once. It mints new Bitcoin and processes transactions. The block reward started at 50 BTC per block in 2009. Approximately every 4 years, it is halved, a phenomenon known as the halving. This controlled issuance means Bitcoin's supply grows more slowly over time, like digital gold gradually being mined from the earth. Eventually, around the year 2140, no more new Bitcoin will be created, and miners will rely entirely on transaction fees. The total supply will never exceed 21 million BTC. Scarcity is not an accident, it is coded in. Proof of work, POW, is more than a mining method. It is a defense system. To rewrite history, an attacker would need to redo all the work of the target block and every block after it, while also generating blocks faster than the honest network continues to extend the chain. This would require unimaginable computational power, electricity, and expense. The system turns honesty into the most profitable strategy, aligning economic incentive with network security. Cheating becomes irrational. Some critics argue that proof of work consumes too much energy, and it is true that mining requires electricity. But energy consumption is not waste. It is the cost of decentralization. Traditional banking systems also consume energy through data centers, armored transport, ATMs, corporate offices, printing, and more, yet we rarely question them with the same intensity. Bitcoin's energy use secures a global financial network without central authority. In fact, much of Bitcoin mining increasingly uses renewable energy, capturing excess power that would otherwise be wasted. There is another layer to this, the difficulty adjustment. Every 2 weeks, the network evaluates how long blocks have been taking to find. If miners have added more computational power and blocks are arriving too quickly, the difficulty increases. If miners leave and the network slows down, difficulty decreases. This self-regulating mechanism ensures that blocks continue to be produced roughly every 10 minutes, regardless of how much mining power joins or leaves. Bitcoin is a living system, adapting automatically, without leaders or governance meetings, simply following the rules written in code. Mining decentralizes trust. No central server decides which transactions are valid. No official decides who can participate. Anyone with hardware and electricity can join. Some miners operate massive facilities packed with machines humming day and night. Others mine with just a few rigs. All are equals in the eyes of the protocol. What matters is computation, not reputation, nationality, or permission. This competition fosters security, but it also distributes power. Decision-making is not concentrated in the hands of a few. Changing Bitcoin's rules requires consensus across the network. Miners, nodes, developers, and users all play a role. If someone attempted to force a change that defied the fundamental principles of Bitcoin, the network could reject it. Power flows not from authority, but from collective agreement. Bitcoin survives because it belongs to everyone and to no one. Mining also establishes the cadence of the chain, block after block, an unending rhythm. Each block contains a snapshot of the world at that moment, a record of value transferred from one address to another. Over time, these snapshots accumulate into history, unchangeable, permanent. You can open the Bitcoin blockchain today and find transactions made years ago, still recorded with absolute clarity. In a world where financial data can be hidden, erased, or manipulated, Bitcoin stands as a monument to transparency. And yet, mining is only one part of Bitcoin's greater impact. As blocks continued to be added and the network survived its early years, people began to see Bitcoin not just as a technological experiment, but as a new form of money. Something scarce, uncensorable, borderless. Something that could store value like gold, but move like email. Something that could serve the unbanked, challenge inflation, and provide refuge during economic chaos. The white paper didn't promise wealth, speculation, or soaring price charts. It promised a method for electronic transactions without relying on trust. But the implications of that idea are immense. When you give individuals control over their own money, you give them freedom. When you create money that cannot be inflated at will, you give it integrity. When you design a system open to anyone, you give the world a financial network that does not discriminate. Bitcoin mining is sometimes misunderstood as merely technical, lines of code, machines, and electricity. But at its heart, it represents something deeper. It embodies the idea that truth can be protected by the many, not dictated by the few. It transforms security from authority-driven to consensus-driven. It is a global collaboration where strangers, competing for profit, unwittingly cooperate to secure a shared system of value. And so the blockchain expands, the miners continue their endless race, and Bitcoin grows ever more resilient. Block after block, it becomes harder to destroy, harder to censor, harder to ignore. What began as an experiment is now a global phenomenon, one that governments debate, institutions invest in, and ordinary people use to save, spend, and protect their wealth. Now that we understand how mining and proof of work secure Bitcoin and create digital scarcity, we can explore the broader significance. How has this 9-page white paper reshaped the modern financial landscape? What cultural, economic, and technological waves has it created? And why does the world continue to pay attention? In the next part, we step into the bigger picture, the impact, the challenges, and the future shaped by the ideas Satoshi planted. Over time, those 9 quiet pages from 2008 began to ripple across the world. At first, only a small niche of cryptographers and enthusiasts paid attention. The idea of digital money without a central authority sounded radical, almost impossible. But as the network continued running day after day, block after block, people started to notice something astonishing. Bitcoin worked. It didn't fail. It didn't shut down. It didn't collapse when someone tested its limits. It simply kept going. Bitcoin became a lighthouse in a storm. In countries plagued by hyperinflation, people found a new way to protect their savings. In places where banking was slow or inaccessible, Bitcoin allowed global value transfer with nothing more than a phone and internet connection. In economies where corruption eroded trust, Bitcoin offered transparency and fairness. It was no longer just theory. It was utility. Slowly, one person told another, forums exploded with curiosity, and miners began joining the network from basements and garages. The price of Bitcoin, once worth less than a fraction of a cent, began to rise, not just as speculation, but as recognition. A digital asset with limited supply and increasing demand behaves predictably. Scarcity creates value, and value draws attention. By the mid-2010s, major discussions had begun. Is Bitcoin digital gold? Could it replace fiat currency? Is this just a bubble? Questions multiplied. Some dismissed it as a fad, others saw it as the future. But regardless of opinions, something undeniable was happening. Bitcoin was forcing the world to rethink money. For centuries, money has been tied to authority. Kings stamped coins, banks managed accounts, central banks issued currency. But Bitcoin introduced something the world had never seen before. Money that runs on mathematics, not decree. Money that no one controls, yet everyone can verify. It is a system of rules without rulers. This shift goes beyond finance. It touches philosophy. When anyone can store their wealth independently, free from confiscation or inflation, power decentralizes. Citizens gain leverage. Governments face a new form of accountability. Bitcoin doesn't seek to destroy systems. It simply offers an alternative, one that competes through transparency instead of trust. Yet with great innovation come challenges. Bitcoin's volatility often shocks newcomers. The price rises sharply, then falls dramatically, like waves crashing on the shore. Critics point to this instability and ask how Bitcoin can be money if its value swings so wildly. But volatility is the price of discovery. Every new technology faces turbulence before reaching maturity. In the early days of the internet, people questioned whether it could ever become mainstream. Now we hardly imagine life without it. Bitcoin's price movements are not signs of weakness, but signs of an open market discovering value. Over time, as adoption grows and supply remains fixed, volatility naturally decreases. The halving cycles, which tighten issuance every 4 years, create rhythms of scarcity and speculation. Some see bubbles, others see cycles of adoption. Through every high and every crash, Bitcoin has survived. Not because someone saved it, but because the network kept running. There are cultural impacts too. Bitcoin gave birth to communities, developers contributing code, artists expressing crypto culture, educators teaching financial literacy, entrepreneurs building exchanges and wallets. Entire industries formed around a protocol that nobody owns. Startups emerged, then corporations, then institutional funds. What began on a mailing list became a global economy measured in billions, even trillions. But the ripple effect doesn't stop at Bitcoin itself. The idea of decentralization inspired countless innovations. Other cryptocurrencies, smart contracts, decentralized finance, NFTs, scaling solutions, and more. Some projects succeeded, many failed, but all trace their roots to the white paper that proved trustless digital money was possible. Whether people love or criticize Bitcoin, they cannot deny it changed the conversation. Governments began reacting. Some countries embraced Bitcoin, seeing it as innovation and opportunity. Others attempted regulation or even bans, fearing loss of control. Yet the decentralized nature of Bitcoin makes banning it as difficult as banning the internet itself. One jurisdiction can outlaw usage, but the network lives everywhere. It cannot be removed by decision, only ignored or adopted. And history shows that powerful tools, once invented, rarely disappear. Bitcoin also challenges inflationary monetary policy. Traditional currency is printed as needed, often increasing supply without limit. This can stimulate economies or erode savings. Bitcoin's supply is fixed, predictable, transparent. It forces a different mindset, long-term thinking, saving over spending, ownership over debt. For some, this is liberating. For others, it provokes debate. Technology evolves too. Early Bitcoin transactions were slow or expensive during congestion. Today, second-layer innovations like Lightning Network enable near-instant, low-cost payments. Custodial and non-custodial wallets make usage accessible to ordinary people. Infrastructure grows stronger each year, and Bitcoin marches toward maturity. Yet despite progress, Bitcoin is not perfect. It is not fast enough for every use case. Its energy consumption remains controversial, even if often misunderstood. Its learning curve can be steep. But these challenges are not flaws, they are trade-offs. Bitcoin values security over speed, decentralization over convenience. It chooses resilience over comfort. Like gold, it is a store of value first, medium of exchange second. The white paper does not try to solve everything. It focuses on a narrow, powerful goal, enabling peer-to-peer digital cash without trusted intermediaries. And in achieving that, it unlocks a universe of possibility. The world continues to explore what else can be built on this foundation. But at the core, Bitcoin remains pure, a neutral protocol, open to anyone. As adoption spreads, the conversation becomes less hypothetical. Bitcoin ATMs appear in cities. Merchants accept it for payment. Families use it to preserve generational wealth. Activists use it to bypass censorship. Millions hold it not as speculation, but as security. Each use case deepens its roots into society. What began as lines of code is now a global social movement, one centered on financial autonomy, transparency, and personal responsibility. Bitcoin is more than money. It is a mirror reflecting the world's relationship with value, trust, and freedom. And now, with all 5 pillars of the white paper explored, peer-to-peer transactions, blockchain, double spend prevention, mining and proof of work, and global impact, we arrive at the final chapter. A moment to reflect personally, beyond mechanics and history. To ask not only what Bitcoin is, but what it means. Because technology explains how Bitcoin works, but only people can explain why it matters. And now, Stepping out of the analytical lens for a moment, I want to reflect on what the Bitcoin white paper truly means, not just to the technology world, not just to the financial world, but to us, as people living in an age defined by trust, money, and digital connections. Reading the white paper today, over a decade after its release, feels like peering into the starting point of a quiet revolution. A 9-page document written in clear technical language without marketing polish or emotional persuasion ended up changing how millions understand money itself. There's something poetic about that. A breakthrough not shouted through headlines or announced by institutions, but seeded quietly into an online mailing list by someone known only by a pseudonym. Bitcoin, whether one loves it or challenges it, forces us to rethink fundamental questions. What is money, really? Where does value come from? Why do we trust centralized systems so implicitly, even after history repeatedly shows us how fragile they can be? Banks collapse, currencies inflate, policies shift with political winds. Yet the white paper offers a thought experiment. What if money could operate beyond those vulnerabilities? What if trust could be replaced by math, transparency, and consensus? It's an idea that sounds almost philosophical. Decentralization not just as technology, but as ideology. I find it fascinating how the white paper is both deeply practical and deeply idealistic. On the practical level, it solves a clear technical issue: double spending in digital currency. It proposes a precise structure: proof of work, blocks, timestamps, incentives. It is engineering, no question. But beneath that structure lies a vision, intentionally or not, that resonates emotionally. A world where individuals hold their own wealth. A world where transactions require no permission. A world where power is distributed, not concentrated. And that vision sparks excitement, hope, and sometimes fear. Because change is never comfortable. Disruption is rarely welcomed by the established order. Bitcoin is no exception. When I think about the white paper, I think about how every disruptive idea starts as something small, misunderstood, even ridiculed. In 2009, people asked whether digital coins could ever mean anything. They questioned its practicality, its security, its relevance. Yet here we are, watching institutions adopt it, countries debate it, and millions store value in it. Was Nakamoto just solving a technical puzzle or planting a seed that continues to grow beyond its original scope? There is beauty in how open and transparent the system is. The code is public. Every transaction is traceable. No central authority can alter history or freeze accounts. It's like money meets open source culture, merging two worlds that seldom intersect. And when I think about decentralization in everyday life, I see that it's not just a financial innovation. It's a statement on human collaboration. Strangers around the world work together to validate truth without needing to trust each other personally. Rules apply equally to everyone. It's messy, slow at times, and certainly not perfect. But it's fair in a way traditional systems often aren't. Of course, even as someone fascinated by Bitcoin, I remain aware of its limitations. The white paper never promised endless scalability or zero energy cost. It solved one problem elegantly and left the future to expand on top of it. Maybe that's how revolutions are born, not finished but begun. Layer 2 solutions, new consensus models, regulatory frameworks, all of these emerged later, responding to challenges the original paper could not fully anticipate. And that's okay. Innovation is a living process. Sometimes I imagine what Satoshi felt when pressing send on that email in 2008. Did he know what he was starting? Or was it simply an experiment, a proposal to spark conversation? The anonymity adds a mythical aura, but also shifts focus away from the creator and toward the creation itself. Bitcoin is not a monument to a person. It is a system owned by no one and everyone at once. And in that sense, it represents something rare in technology, a legacy not built on personality, but on principles. For me personally, the most powerful part of the white paper is how it reminds us that ideas can ripple far beyond their origins. One PDF, freely shared, challenged the structure of global finance. One abstract concept inspired developers, investors, dreamers, skeptics, and reformers. It made people argue, build, speculate, innovate. It became more than software. It became a movement. When I finish reading the white paper, I don't just understand Bitcoin better. I appreciate how innovation happens. Simple, precise, unpretentious. No hype, no campaign. Just a solution that spoke for itself. It makes me wonder what other transformative ideas might already be quietly circulating today, waiting for the right moment to catch fire. It makes me reflect on how open collaboration can surpass centralized planning, how trust can emerge from shared rules rather than authority. And beyond the technical brilliance, the white paper leaves me with a sense of responsibility. Bitcoin empowers the individual, but with empowerment comes the need for understanding. Holding your own keys, managing digital assets, navigating volatility, none of this is effortless. Decentralization grants freedom, but it also demands awareness. There's no customer support hotline for autonomy. You are the guardian of your own value. That is liberating, but also humbling. As I look at the world today, where inflation rises, geopolitical tensions grow, and digital life merges with physical life, the white paper feels more relevant than ever. Not because Bitcoin is flawless or destined to replace all money, but because it offers a new option where previously there was none, an alternative, a challenge, a question mark written into the financial structure of society. It reminds us that money doesn't have to be defined only by governments or banks. It can be defined by consensus, by algorithms, by communities. In the end, my reflection is this: the Bitcoin white paper is not just a technical document, it's a spark, a mirror that asks what kind of monetary future we want. Whether Bitcoin becomes the global standard or remains digital gold for a niche audience, its impact is undeniable. It shifted conversations, reshaped innovation, and opened a door that cannot be closed. And perhaps the most valuable part is how it inspires new generations to think differently, to challenge assumptions, to explore trustless systems, to build in the open. Reading it today leaves me with admiration, curiosity, and a sense of awe. Because history doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it begins quietly, in 9 simple pages, released anonymously into the world. And from those pages grew one of the most influential technological movements of our time.